When I first started my photography business, I was focused on portrait and wedding photography exclusively, nothing else. However, after the pandemic, or actually a little before the pandemic, and then definitely during the whole pandemic, my business really shifted quite a bit away from photography actually, and more into coaching and more content creation. While I've been doing coaching and teaching for many years now, it really is a huge part of my business nowadays in 2022. So one of the things that has helped me do this and this shift from really photography and then building something completely different that still aligns with what I was creating, but it helps other entrepreneurs go through the same motion of building a business, is this podcast, the Focus and Bloom podcast. I started this in 2020, and now I have a second podcast, which is pretty much the Spanish version of the Focus and Bloom podcast, which I launched this June. And it really has been able to help me create awareness, build my brand, and help set myself and brand as an authority leader in this particular area. So to help you with this is part 2 of a 2-part series where I'm talking about marketing your podcast, and I'm walking you through the different steps that I take to market the Focus and Bloom podcast. In part 1, I talked about all the things that you need to do prior to pressing that record button. Now, this second part is pretty much all about what you need to do after you've recorded your episode and how you're going to market. I'll focus specifically on how I use Instagram to promote my podcast, and I'll share several tips on what type of reels you can create to promote your podcast. So all of this coming right up. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Yesenia Bocanegra from Focus and Bloom Studios, and here I share a variety of tips and tactics to help you up-level your content creation game. So if you're into creating content for podcasting or a YouTube channel, or you're really starting a business and you need help with all this content creation stuff, then I highly encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel or subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss out on any upcoming videos or tutorials or podcast episodes. Y si hablas español, entonces te recomiendo que visites mi canal de Focus and Bloom en español y el podcast de Focus and Bloom podcast en español. Now let's go ahead and dive into marketing your podcast. So one of the ways that I market the Focus and Bloom podcast is through Instagram. I repurpose the heck out of my podcast as much as I could possibly think of, and as much as my time actually allows me to do. Now, Instagram is really instrumental, or has been very instrumental for me for 2 things. One, create brand awareness overall, but also to really promote the podcast and bring clients. So let me walk you through what I do. So how do I do this? I use Instagram Reels. I love Instagram Reels because they're short snippets of videos. Now they're a little bit longer, up to 90 seconds, but short form video is what these platforms are now pushing for. So Instagram Reels, you've got TikTok, and then you have YouTube Shorts. So short form video is really something that you should consider, highly consider, when it comes to promoting your podcast. So let me say a couple of ways that I use Reels to promote the podcast. Number 1 is I do a roundup of episode, and I don't do this often, but I do it every now and then. And really, this could be a collection of highlight episodes that you want to showcase and bring a little bit more attention to. These could be episodes that maybe talk about a specific topic, like this is a 2-part series. So I could do a roundup of this episode and then the previous one where I am talking about marketing your podcast. So I can do a reel promoting these 2. Maybe you're about to start the season, or you're launching the podcast, and then you could just do a roundup of what to expect. Especially when you're launching a podcast, you definitely want to have at least 3 episodes to launch with. So you can do a reel that has a mashup of all these just snippets of those 3 episodes. I actually have an example here of what I did for the Focus and Bloom podcast and the Focus and Bloom podcast en español, where I did a roundup of highlighted or best of episodes for one, and then just highlight of the first 3 episodes that were available. Now I'm talking about Reels, and Reels are videos, and TikToks is video, and YouTube is video, YouTube Shorts. However, there are other ways that you can still use these types of channels or video formats even if you have an audio podcast. Now, you probably already heard about Audiograms. And if you haven't, Audiograms are really just like a graphic way or somewhat animated way that you can then create a video out of the audio bit of your podcast episode. And these are really helpful. However, in my case, I haven't really seen much engagement with that. But other clients that I have, I created reels just from using a standard or a stock background, stock photo, stock video that I grabbed from Canva and just put a really inspiring quote of them. And it just blows up and it just does really well. So I really don't know. It really depends on your audience. So it's important to know who you are speaking to. So can't really tell a trend on that one, but definitely worth two things. One, you definitely need to know who you're speaking to, but two, you need to test it out. I mean, I tested the Audiograms, it didn't work, so I'm not doing it. But I've done other stuff and then that has worked. And that's what I'm sharing today. All right, so let me get back to this. Now, still, if you have an audio podcast, there are a couple of ways that you can still incorporate video into the whole equation here so that you can then create reels that have an actual face video component like what you're seeing here. Now, one way that you can do it is, let's say you are recording the podcast, you're here chilling and just recording it. You can put a camera right there and just record yourself as you're reading whatever it is that you're reading or just going over the details of your podcast. So it would look something like this. So it's not looking straight at the camera. So you may not feel that pressure of like what it means to look at the camera and speak to the camera. And yeah, that's an option. Yes, when you are adding video, you have to think of a little bit more, more things like the lighting, the camera itself. But you can then record your episode as you would always. Just prop that camera. It could be a webcam too. Could be your phone as well, actually. And then grab a little bit of a snippet from that recording, share that as an Instagram story, and then create a reel from that snippet. And that is a way that you can still use video, create reels that are from or inspired by the podcast episode that you're recording. Another way that you can do this, or a similar way, is if you have guests, you're probably already using a video chat type of platform. So why not just record it and grab a snippet of that conversation? Maybe the same highlight that you want to include in the quotes, then maybe turn that into a reel and just grab a snippet of that. And then in the captions say, check out the full episode, click the link in bio, check out the full episode here, And that's another way that you are still incorporating video without requiring the whole production of video. Because if you are hiring somebody to edit your podcast, that could save you a little bit of money because editing audio is a little bit more affordable than editing a full video. So you could probably easily just do a quick Instagram reel on your phone, or maybe you can even do it in Canva or just upload it as is. Really, at least it is some sort of video component that you are integrating into your podcast. There's so many stats about video and how video really is able to help build better connections. So you are already inside people's ears because you're already creating a podcast. What better way to complement that than just by adding a face to the voice? The next type of reel is one that is inspired by the content of your podcast episode, but not derived directly from the episode itself. So right now, an example is this episode, this part 2 episode is really focused on marketing your podcast. Part 2, this one, is focused on how to use reels to market your podcast. And I'm outlining 4 different types of reels to help you with this. So I can grab this highlight of number 1, 2, 3, 4 and make that a reel, which is directly from the podcast. Or I can make a reel that has maybe me pointing at something or just like trending sound, really depends on your personal style too. And I'm just outlining these 4 ways that you can use reels to promote your podcast. 2 different types of reels, all talking about the same thing. So you're not reinventing the wheel here. You're just really maximizing the content that you are already putting out there. You do not have enough time to reinvent the wheel. There's way too many things that you need to do as an entrepreneur. So reinventing the wheel is not one of them. Repurpose, and repurpose your content as much and as often as you possibly can. Maximize it and put your content to work for you and not the other way around. As always, and this goes for pretty much everything that you do for your business, you want to take a moment to step back and reassess and reevaluate everything that you're doing for your business to see how the work that you're putting in is generating results, whatever that results is that you're looking for. Now, for podcasting or for Instagram and social media, for Reels, you want to take a look at what are the Reels that are performing the best. Are they the ones that are extracted directly from the podcast, or are they the ones that are inspired by the podcast? Are you using Audiograms and those work magnificently well for you? What is it that is working best for you and for your audience? Remember, it's for your audience. So you're speaking to somebody that has a problem and you want to help them with that. So figure that one out. Check often, because that will then help you, one, create new content related to how this is performing, two, create reels inspired by what is really generating more views, more likes, more followers, more subscribers, more DMs, whatever that is. So definitely, whatever you do in your business, take a time to reevaluate and reassess what's working and what can be and needs to be improved. If you want to learn more about my workflow concerning podcast production, video podcast production, definitely check out today's show notes and the description box if you're watching us on YouTube, and download my free video podcast guide where I walk you through not just gear recommendations, but really this workflow of how I market and produce my podcast, the Focus and Bloom podcast. So it's a free guide. You definitely just want to check it out and let me know. All right. So question for you is, are you doing a video podcast, or maybe are you considering doing a podcast altogether? Let me know in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.